Need to get ahead of the game? We're going to help you out with Beat the Waiver Wire. That's what it's called. Beat the Waiver Wire right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Adam and Dave, yes, this show only
Not sure what I heard just then.
Beat the Wire, something like that. I don't know. I think I just said Beat the Wire and I skipped. You know what? It only gets better. You got to start slow. Okay, set the expectation.
We all make mistakes.
I didn't make any mistakes, Dave. You made the mistake. So anyway, Arizona, Carolina, Giants, Buccaneers on bye next week. But you should be really looking out for even beyond that, right? Get ahead of the game because there's more buys coming. But anyway, just for next week, who are we looking at? And even for this week, I know you like to throw in a little current week help as well. Who are we looking at quarterback?
Yeah, if you're really struggling at QB, and again, these are players that are rostered in 55% or lower in CBS Sports leagues. Russell Wilson is who I'd run to. He's got Washington this week and against the Ravens that just allowed a bazillion yards and touchdowns to Joe Burrow on Thursday. I think Russell Wilson looked really good in his last two games. Here's hoping he looks good coming out of the bye. And the Steelers offense, which added a piece in Mike Williams, we'll talk about him in a little bit. I think he's probably the best quarterback that's widely available that you can add to your fantasy team right now. Two other quarterbacks for week 11, not necessarily week 10, Drake May, Jameis Winston. And don't use Jameis in week 10. He's on bye. But week 11, he's got New Orleans, and that's a matchup that I think he can be decent in.
And Drake May has the Rams in week 11. So, yeah, good call. I like that. All right. How about running backs to stash?
Let's look at Tyjae Spears. We've brought his name up a lot lately, and people aren't picking him up. We saw on Thursday that Tony Pollard didn't practice. He also didn't practice for 2 days last week, and then he went out and he had a good game. This is more of like a long-term stash play, but it's also an example of just how bad it is at running back when you're looking for somebody to start in week number 10. He's a desperation starter, certainly much more of a stash. Other guys, if you're desperate for a running back this week, Roshan, Jaleel McLaughlin, Cam Akers. Akers is toward the top of my long-term stash list, though. I put Audric Estime at the top. Had an interesting conversation this morning with one of our producers of CBS Sports HQ, and he's adding Estime in every league because he doesn't think he needs an injury to be the main guy in Denver. I just don't know if he'll ever be more than a 1A type of running back. But sure, Estime is somebody you can stash. And then the other names besides Akers you've heard before, Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Jalen Wright, Sean Tucker. Don't forget about Zamir White. Don't forget about Jerome Ford. Those guys are low owned. They will play a little bit, but they're stash guys. They're guys that you're going to put on the end of your bench. You'll probably drop them when you need the roster spot. But speculation is part of the game of fantasy football.
And so are wide receivers. Wide receivers are also part of the game. So who should we stash there?
Are they? I didn't know that. I don't know if the Ravens knew that after what Jamar Chase did on Thursday. Xavier Leggett leads off the list. He's got the Giants in week 10. Then he's on bye after that. So this might be a 1 week usage for Xavier Leggett. But if he has a good game again, scores again, you might carry him through the bye. And he's acting as a de facto number 1 receiver for the Carolina Panthers. Other receivers who you can start this week, Wan'Dale Robinson, Demario Douglas, Nick Westbrook-Akine. And then I put Parker Washington on the list too, just in case he ends up being a short area target for Mac Jones to kind of lean on. Stash-worthy wide receivers. I put Mike Williams toward the top of the list. I'm not a huge Mike Williams fan, but I am a fan of what I've seen in the Steelers offense since Russell Wilson has taken over, and he's joining it. So that's a wide receiver that you can put on your bench now, and who knows, you might be using him as a number 3 receiver in a couple of weeks. Other wideouts you could stash, Christian Watson, who's on bye this week, Jalen Coker, who's on bye next week, Parker Washington, his name is coming up again, and Troy Franklin with Denver.
Yeah, I mean, Parker Washington makes sense. Just there's going to be hopefully Trevor Lawrence next week, but good matchups this week and next week. I can't trust them this week. All right, tight ends. Any tight ends to stash?
Jatavion Sanders, we know he's on the injury report. He popped up on Thursday, and we need to see what his status is. Obviously, if he's out, you're not going to add him because he won't play in week 10, and he's on bye in week 11. But I think there's some good talent there, and I like how he's connected with Bryce Young since Bryce Young has come back. If you need a tight end for this week, Jonnu Smith against the Rams. He's had at least 9 PPR points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's not bad. And then 2 guys with opportunities, both with the last name Johnson. Theo Johnson, Jawan Johnson. It's basically just because there are other guys hurt in their offenses and they might be able to see an uptick in targets. Short-term deal, but if you're desperate for tight end, you can go in that direction.
And just to highlight Jonnu Smith one more time, he is rostered in only 25% of leagues, has 6 to 8 targets in 4 straight games, and his next 2 opponents are the Rams, who are 25th against tight ends, and the Raiders, who are 27th against tight ends. So, yes, good wide tight end to stash. We'll be right back with your questions to answer some of your start-sit needs here for Week 10 after this on FFT Express. All right, we're back, and let's see what we got. Spears or Javonte Williams this week?
For now, it's Javonte, and it'll probably be Javonte if Tony Pollard plays. And if Tony Pollard doesn't play, then you know for sure that Tyjae Spears is a start.
Is Tyjae Spears worth a pickup if the only player I can drop is Christian Watson?
Yes. Only if you're really thin on running back depth. That's the only way I'd do that.
When are we going to, I don't want to give up on Watson, but he doesn't play enough.
He's not an every down player for the Packers.
Yeah, I would drop.
He hasn't been. We'll see what happens coming out of the bye.
Now, if you need to start someone in a week, Watson's probably better than Spears unless Pollard's out. But Pollard is dealing with his foot injury, so I would do it. Let's see. How do we feel about Ricky Pearsall rest of season?
Another stashable wide receiver, but not one that I'm as excited about as the guys that I named, which is saying something because Mike Williams is one of the guys that I named, and he's somebody that's not worth getting excited about.
DeAndre Hopkins or Juwan Jennings?
It's Jennings this week. It might be Hopkins rest of season, though. Would
you trade Josh Jacobs and Deebo Samuel for Christian McCaffrey and James Conner?
Absolutely. What? To get McCaffrey and Conner?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would do it too, but I don't think it's just because some people don't know what, nobody knows what to expect from Christian McCaffrey, but some people are more worried than others.
It's the most optimistic we've been in McCaffrey since the Thursday before week 1.
Thoughts on Javon Baker?
When he starts to play more for New England, I'll be more excited. I know he's starting to play a little bit more for the Patriots. I'd say he's a stash in Dynasty, but he's already being stashed in Dynasty.
And Eckler or Amari Cooper?
Comes down to whether or not Brian Robinson plays. If Brian Robinson is out, it's Eckler. If Brian Robinson is in and Cooper's active, then Cooper.
J.K. Dobbins or James Cook, PPR?
Love them both. I'm going to go with Dobbins over Cook, though. Matchup against Tennessee, I like.
You wanted to talk about some DSTs to stash.
4 DSTs on my list. The Browns, who take on the Saints. That'll be especially good if there's no Chris Olave. Packers against Chicago. Dolphins against Vegas. Cowboys against Houston. But really, it's that Browns DST. Everybody drop them because they haven't been great and they're on bye. But this matchup coming up for them, I wouldn't use them after Week 11. But that Week 11 matchup will be a good one. Get ahead of it. Add the Browns DST while you can.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Lippy. And we'll talk to you on Sunday on FFT Express. Have a good weekend, everybody.